So I think I'll just get us started. And as you all know, this is an info session, an ed session on travel with a disability. And I have recruited Ryan Clarkson, who I've known for a number of years, who is our GF Strong peer liaison in the office down on the floor. So I've known him from being an inpatient and hanging around in his office and annoying him and dropping in, when I go to appointments and things like that. And I work with him. But he has traveled, I'll say, a ton. He's traveled in many different ways, so that's really good. And he also coordinates our YVR orientation sessions every year for new clients. So he's got a really broad perspective on travel. I know he likes to camp. He's done a lot of camping. And then last year he did I'll call it a hotel road trip, sports trip, where he went to a number of different sporting events on the East Coast. And he did it flying out there and then traveling from there. I know he's probably done more than that, but those are the ones that I can remember. I'm not going to tell some of the stories he's told me about some of the camping things he has done, but we all we all do things every once in a while that we don't necessarily want to tell people about. But with that, I will introduce Ryan, and he's got his presentation up on the board. And if you will, can we wait till the end to ask questions? So just make sure you know what they are, or throw them in the chat box. Okay, and with that, Ryan, you're up and going.
Thank you very much. And thank you everybody for allowing me to join your group and talk about accessible travel. So part of what I do here at GF Strong Rehabilitation Center is I attend all the education sessions, and one of them I put on is on accessible travel. So my goal in that is just to give people some tools and a little bit of confidence in planning a trip, what to look for, what they can expect at the airports. So my slides are generally geared toward people here, but here at GS Strong, but there's a lot to take away. Whether you are ambulatory using a cane or you use a power chair, there's going to be a lot of good information for everybody. So we're going to talk about pre-planning. We're going to talk about what you can expect at the airport. We're also going to talk about what you should look for at your destination and deciding on what a good destination would be and what that might look like in terms of accessibility. So yeah, let's just jump right into it. So where should you go? How should you book it? There are travel agents that assist in creating accessible travel packages, such as Travel for All. While they may be convenient, there is no reason you cannot research and book your own trip. So in this presentation, we will cover some of the most asked questions when it comes to getting back into traveling. Nobody knows your needs more than you do. So that's why I feel like there is no reason that you can't take this on yourself. And hopefully with what we learn here today, you have a little bit more confidence doing so. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk about what to expect at the airport, boarding and disembarking the plane, what happens to your equipment on the airplane, tips on finding a hotel or neighborhood that is right for you, and how to utilize various online resources to help cement your choices. So will the airport or airline be ready for you? Yes, but only if you do your due diligence. So most third-party online booking systems do have the options to list your accessibility needs. For example, if I'm booking through Expedia because I want to use my Visa points or collect my Visa points, they tend to have an option flying with a mobility device. So I can click that icon and theoretically I should be in the system as somebody who's flying with a mobility device. So even if your e-confirmation has noted these needs, I think you should still call the airline to confirm. So what that might look like if you're flying with Air Canada, WestJet, if you just type in Air Canada Accessibility Service or WestJet Accessibility Service, the first thing that's going to pop up on Google is their accessibility department. So they'll have a 1-800 number, they'll have a website. So what I do, I book my trip to New Orleans. I call via the Air Canada accessibility hotline. I say, hey, my name's Ryan. I'm flighting on this date, and I just want to make sure you guys know I'm coming in a chair. Fortunately, every time that I do call, they say, yeah, we have you in the system. It's coming with a manual chair. But if not, then they're going to put me in the system. And I think it's important to let the airline know what type of equipment you're coming with, especially if you have more complex needs, which we'll go into for a bit. So we get this question quite a bit. What can go on the plane? All mobility devices, including most e-assist device, can go on the plane. Battery-powered medical devices can go on. You want to double check with the airlines about specific sizes and refer to user manual. Bring a photocopy battery of the specs if you want to be very careful. So most planes only allow up to 300-watt battery. If you're flying in most Western countries, it's not going to be an issue with the power chair. If you're flying to certain areas that maybe don't have a lot of experience, they might have more questions about the battery and the type of battery. So I think it's really good that if you have your user manual for your power chair, you might want to photocopy the specs of what the battery is. That way there's no second guessing when you're at the airlines and you're kind of going through the boarding process and getting asked these questions. You can just have a photocopy of what that battery spec is, and it'll give them a little more confidence. You can bring spare batteries, but they must be properly packaged so that they are protected from short circuits and damage. And also all medical supplies and medications can go on. It is worth noting that for some things like ventilators and other specialized equipment, you might want to give the airline 48 hours notice just to be extra careful. So common theme in this presentation is going to be due diligence, just making sure that you have all your I's dotted and your T's crosses. That way you're kind of a lot more confident going into your trip. So a big question is, how do you get on and off the plane? So you've gone through the airport, you've gone through security. What happens next? So what I like about the option of getting on and off the plane is that I will be first one on, last one off. I like that because then it means I don't have 400 people watching me transfer or get on and off the plane. I can go at my own pace. So what will happen is that somebody will either come look for you based off they know somebody in a chair is coming, or they'll call you and say, Ryan, now boarding. And what that will look like is everybody's boarding at noon. They'll probably come to me at 12:45 or ask me to come down to the gate at 12:45. They'll bring me down the tunnel to the airplane. So I'm still in my chair when I go to the plane. Based off the information I provided them before I even showed up to the airport of my accessibility needs, they'll either have the lift pictured on the left and or the aisle chair on the right. And an aisle chair is exactly what it sounds like. It's a chair that's skinny enough to go back on the aisle. So they'll transfer you onto the aisle chair, and then they'll bring you down to the aisle, and then they'll lift up the arm and put you on the your seat that you're allocated to. Now you'll notice in that photo in the left that is YVR's sling, but a lot of people, if they feel more comfortable in their own sling, they'll actually go to the airport already sitting on the sling, and then that way they just hook their own sling up and then get transferred into the seat. And then when I go on, I bring anything that can fall off. So my clothing guards, my seat cushion, anything that might fall off my chair, I get them to bring on the plane for me. So what happens to your chair while you're flying? It gets packed away. So don't forget to take anything off, like I mentioned. Take photos of how to reassemble parts of your chair if needed. This is a big one for people with power chairs. So it is highly recommended that some of the more sensitive parts of a chair, especially a chair that has electronics, get tucked away. So you don't want your joystick kind of just poking out there. Anything that can get loosened up and tucked into the body of the chair is quite important. So it is worth noting that your chair, theoretically, I say theoretically because they do make mistakes, but it does not get thrown into regular luggage. So it's not on the cart, on the little trolley kind of going in. When I transfer onto the aisle chair or I get up with my canes and walk in, two people will then bring my chair down. So if you're in a power chair and you get transferred, you might want to have the arms and everything that's very sensitive get tucked into the bottom of the chair, the body of the chair, sorry. And when you arrive, you might want to have either a picture or how to reassemble that chair so it's easy for you, your partner, your caregiver, or anybody you're traveling with to kind of make sure everything gets put back. You'll also want to show the airline crew how to put your power chair in neutral as well. Some people I know, they'll actually go to the airplane in a manual chair, or they'll get transferred into the airport chair, and they'll even have their powered chair shrink wrap. I think that's, for some people, they like to do that. For others, it seems like quite a lot of work. So a lot of airports have the luggage shrink wrap, and I know a couple people in power chairs, they'll actually have their power chair shrink wrap. So you just want to be cautious. Anything that's very sensitive, and if it gets broken, will cause massive headaches. You either want to take off or just have tucked in so your chair is just more solid.
Mm.
Are airplane washrooms accessible? Probably not. So while some larger long haul or premium airlines might have accessible washrooms, they will likely not have a chair on board for you to use, and the flight staff would not be able to assist you. And when I say accessible in quotes, they tend to be mobility accessible. So not accessible enough where an aisle chair can get in and spin around. Being here at GS Strong, and I know some of you have probably been in the SCI or related community for quite a while, it's very important to learn about your body, learn about your routines, have a good routine schedule, learn what your body likes and doesn't like in terms of bladder routines, bowel routines, because it is quite important to make sure that these routines line up with your flight. So you don't have to go to the washroom if at all possible. So for some reason, that for some people that might be doing a catheter 5 minutes before you board the plane. For people doing a longer flight, that might be getting an indwelling catheter. That might be for some men using a condom catheter and leg bag. I know a lot of people will have, including myself, I'll go on with an empty Gatorade bottle where I could just tap my leg bag in my seat into the Gatorade bottle. I know some people that have asked for an empty wine bottle from the stewardess and have done that, and then their partner goes to the washroom and empty the wine bottle. They get a lot of weird looks doing that, but it works for them. So you just really want to kind of have a healthy routines that you're doing at home in the community, and then develop that you take onto the airplane. I did mention that some larger airplanes or long haul airplanes will have accessible washrooms, quote unquote. And some airlines do offer the option to hop into the aisle chair and at least take you to the washroom. But when it comes to that, they could just take you into the door. You can't spin around. So some airlines have gotten creative where they have closed the curtains so people can kind of do their routines or go to the washroom while a flight attendant sort of blocks off the washroom. That's not a policy that you can say is official or it's going to translate to every airline. So going back again to due diligence, if you feel like you might actually have to use a physical washroom based on your mobility, you might want to talk to the airline. So they'll look at the flight, the airplane type, and then determine what might be possible for you. How to avoid pressure sores? That's a huge problem here at GS Strong. It's also a huge problem in the community. So use the standard playbook that you learn in rehab and that you learn in the community. Have your travel partner assist with you. So that's either kind of leaning on the front seat, that's leaning side to side. Essentially what you would do in your chair kind of carries over to the airline seats, albeit if you're in a power chair and doing a deep tilt back as part of your pressure relief, that's not something you can do. So for some, they might bring their own cushion onto the plane, but for those using an air cushion, you got to imagine it like it's a bag of chips. When you take a bag of chips up in the mountains to high elevation, you see that bag of chips expand, and you could be at risk of popping. So some people will let the air out, but what happens when you land, then all of a sudden you have a deflated cushion. So you either want to have a travel cushion, or if you're going to use your own cushion, you want to make sure that you can fill it back up with the air when you're in the airport. I like using my cushion. I'm 6 feet tall, so even when I'm on my cushion, my feet will touch the ground. If you do want to use a cushion and you're of shorter stature, you might want to make sure that your legs can still touch the ground, because if you don't have full trunk and you're sitting in your seat and you don't have your feet positioned on the ground, it might be tough with that balance.
This is all.
And when it comes to balance, some people will use and bring their own chest strap. You can't rely on the airlines.
I mean, it's for people that are in wheelchairs. So
Sorry, it's got to mute. If people can mute themselves, sorry.
Yeah,
And
please.
then, so some people will bring a chest strap or a body strap to keep themselves positioned in the airline seat. So you can't rely on the airline to do that. So you made the trip, you got on the plane, you survived the flight, you landed. How are you going to get to the airport from your hotel? Pre-booking an accessible cab will make life a lot easier. Call your hotel or resort to see if they have an accessible shuttle. If you are renting a vehicle with hand controls, call ahead of time to make sure that they will be ready when you arrive. Look into what vehicle offers ride-sharing service companies. So some cities that have Uber or Lyft, they have an options that allows people to choose drivers that have training with people with mobility impairments. So that's people assisting them getting into the car, taking out manual wheelchairs, putting them in the trunk. They just won't assist with transfers. So this is very important, and especially around the finding out if where you're landing even has accessible cabs. I made the mistake of flying in New Orleans once. I look on the website about accessible taxis in New Orleans, and directly on the city website, it says, call John. Like, John? John for accessible taxis in New Orleans? It's literally one guy named John in New Orleans has an accessible cab for the whole city. So I had to show up, and hopefully John was actually working that day. And of course, with my luck, he wasn't. So I had to call my hotel, and they said, we don't provide an accessible cab, but one of our partnering hotels on the same block does. So it took a little bit of just research and calling around to make sure I had the appropriate vehicle to get to where I was going. A lot of cities like we're quite lucky here in YVR that you can just go outside the door and find an accessible cab. But if you're going to like Central America, South America, parts of Asia, Eastern Europe, stuff like that, you need to kind of be a little bit creative and do a lot of research of how you're going to get to where you need to go to. So don't take my word for it. Things can change all the time. So when I created this travel presentation, things change all the time within the airlines, month to month, week to week, year to year, in terms of processes, how they do things. You need to be very diligent and always just taking and doing the work yourself. So I'm offering pretty good information here, but it's not a black and white guide that will kind of carry you through. You still need to kind of do a little research and think outside the box. So as I mentioned earlier, always call the designated accessibility phone numbers associated with each airline. Between that, their website, they will always have the most up-to-date information. So again, Googling whatever airline you're going with and accessibility services. Big shout out to my organization, Spinal Cord Injury BC. Before I even knew about our organization, when I went on my first trip post-injury, I just typed in flying in a wheelchair. And on our website, all these videos came up where we went to YVR, we kind of showed everything we're talking about. So seeing peers doing it actually gave me a really good insight into what I can expect. Peer support is a big part of what we're doing. The fact that you're in this group, I'm sure you all kind of know and understand that. So talking to people who've been there and done that. There's people in my position, Duncan's position, all of your position, thousands of people that have done it before us. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We're not doing anything new here. There are a lot of people in the community that are willing to give really good detailed advice just to alleviate any stress and anxiety that you might have around going around the trip. We're all varying in our abilities. So Duncan's quite different. I'm quite different. So how we navigate things and how we approach things are going to be a little bit different, but it doesn't matter if you're talking to somebody who's fully ambulatory or somebody who uses a sip and puff. Everybody's going to have really good information that you can take parts of. And also we have a travel guide that's either in PDF or booklet form. So a lot of really good resources on our website. Some other tips and tricks you might not think of. Have at least 3 days worth of supplies on you in case your luggage gets lost. I think that's quite important because wherever you land, if they lose your luggage and you're out of catheters, you're out of your baclofen, you're out of whatever medication you need, it's going to be quite stressful. So I always make sure I have a few days on me. And what that few days does is then I call back home to a family member, a trusted person I know can overnight supplies to my hotel. So what I would bring on the plane is usually enough to carry over what it would take to get supplies to my hotel. Know what the most accessible taxi company is, have them stored in your phone. And I think everybody should know that domestically, and even within America, so a personal attendant can fly for free within Canada and the USA. That's with WestJet and Air Canada, excluding Hawaii and the Dominican Republic. So you just have to pay the tax. And what that means is you fill out some medical forms. And if you're flying with a friend, family member, loved one, they can fly for free as an attendant. And that program is called the personal attendant. So you must complete the necessary medical forms with 48 hours notice. With WestJet, it's called the WestJet Medical Information Form. With Air Canada, it's called the Fitness for Air Travel Form. If you are accepted into this program, you cannot fly solo with the airline going forward until you appeal that decision. The airline can retain your medical information for 1 to 3 years, so you don't need to fill it out every time you're flying. You could book your flight and then reach out to the airline, or wait for the approval comes and then book your flight. You may request one person to be your personal attendant from the originating city and have a different person on the returning destination. And they also allow one name change up to 2 hours before the flight. So if you have your partner and all of a sudden you want to have one of your child do it, you can change that 2 hours before the flight. And this program can easily be navigated by you and your family. So you have the destination, you know what to expect on the flight. Now what? Do your research. So this is my favorite part of the presentation when I'm discussing travel to people who are new to it, or at least returning to it. So for the next few slides, I'm going to use the example of my experience on my first trip, which was my brother's stag party, 14 guys flying to Nashville. I was petrified because I've never done a flight. I was with 14 people and they wanted to stay in a hostel. And I remember my time backpacking Europe before my injury. I'm thinking about hostels. You're in a room with 20 people. How am I going to do my routines? How am I going to be comfortable? So I didn't want to be the wet blanket of the group. So instead of saying, no, I can't stay there, I just wanted to make sure I could. And I wanted to make sure where we're going was comfortable for everybody. So calling ahead, reading reviews, tailoring your Google searches. So Nashville hostel plus accessibility in my case. Ask a ton of questions. When you're dealing with people on the other end of the phone, be nice, but be nice and patient, but you still want to vocalize what your needs are to get the appropriate answer. Asking around your network, asking peers, our info line, various travel sites, understanding what exactly your biggest concerns are, and then vocalizing that. So for some people, that might be bed height, that might be the door width to the washroom, that might be the shower configuration, path of travel, grab bars. There's nothing wrong with calling the hotel, asking them to measure out the door width, asking them, can a travel lift get under the bed? How high is the bed? Call these places, get the answer that you need, and think outside the box and get creative. So for this example, I needed to find a hotel in Tofino. I thought I found one that looked accessible, so I went under the reviews. I did a tailored key search. I just typed in accessible, and I saw a review that just said we were so happy and impressed with the accessible room. They were talking about the doorways, the roll-in shower, the fold-down bench. They also included a couple photos. So that wasn't me taking the hotel's word for it. That was me actually looking up reviews of people like us who've been there. So I could see the reviews, I could see their photos, and that just was the extra step beyond what the hotel's telling me. So that gave me quite a bit of confidence. So for some of my searches, I look for accessible, wheelchair, disability. If you're going to the States, pre-tariff, I would have looked up ADA, stuff like that, American Disability Act. Shower is important for me. When I'm driving, parking is important to me. So I'll comb all these websites. I'll use the keyword search function. If you're on a big page, if you hit Control F on your keyboard, a little pop-up will happen in the corner and you can type in any word, and the word will get highlighted all over the website. So that's an important tool just to kind of make sure that you're getting the most information and directly from our mouths being the SCI community. 5 minutes of research using Google Maps will give you so much confidence and understanding of where you're going. So I mentioned for my trip, we wanted to stay in a hostel. I wanted to make sure that the area was accessible. So I used Google Maps. I went down to Street View. For those who don't know what Street View is, you can go on anywhere and drop a little pin and you get a 360 Street View that you can just navigate around communities for. So I popped out to our hostel. I saw there was a double wide door. There's a push button to get in. There's all the curb cuts to get to and from the area. So right away, I know the outside's good. I don't have to worry about that. I also saw that some random person, not the hostel owner, posted a 360 view inside the hostel. So I can see that there is a ramp to get down to common areas. I saw the kitchen had cutouts. So I know that the outside's good. I know that getting in's good. I went on YouTube, typed the hostel name in, and there was just some guy rolling through the hostel with a video. And I saw he went to the washroom, and I quickly paused on minute 4 because he scanned by the washroom, and I saw, oh, there's a shower with a wall bench, and I could actually wheel into it. So it took me 5 minutes just to do a little bit of research to see that I can get in it, I can get around it, I can use the washroom, and the rooms are good. So it wasn't me relying on the 17-year-olds on the phone calling and me being like, are we accessible? And they say, yeah, come on down. Because for anybody that's been in our community for quite a while and they've done that approach in the past, you can, I'm sure everybody's been burned who's done that, where they say, yeah, we're accessible, come on down. You go and, oh, we're accessible once you get 4 steps in. So I'll reach out to the hostel, I'll reach out to the hotel, the lodge, the cruise ship, figure that out. But then I want to do a little bit of research on social media, YouTube, Google Maps, and see what other people are saying. Combine that all together, you get a really good black and white photo of what you can expect. So this is a picture of, I think it's called Broadway Street. For those who've been to Nashville, it's the main drag where everything's on. So that's where all your honky tonk bars, your restaurant. It's the main strip where 14 guys on a stag want to hang out. So I knew where our hostel was, and I knew where the very end of the strip was. So I punched those into Google. I clicked the little bicycle icon, and I saw that the elevation from one end to another was roughly 125 feet. So I knew if we started at the bottom and worked way up, by the time we go to a couple honky tonk bars, I get a couple ginger ales in me, I might be a little too tired to want to wheel the rest of the way. So based off using the cycling icon on Google Maps, I say, well, why don't we start at the top and we'll work our way down. I can propose that without seem like I'm kind of putting it on the 14 people I'm with. It's just a natural way. Let's start at the top, work our way down. I had a couple accessible restaurants and bars in mind, and it just made life a lot easier starting at the top and then not having to use a lot of energy as the hours go by. So Google's great for that. You can think outside the box. There's a lot of really good tools to kind of help cement your trip, your neighborhood. So for me these days, it's restaurants, it's museums, it's stuff like that I want to build my trip around, and public transportation. So you're still a bit nervous about a big trip, start small. I always recommend that a staycation is a good way to get your feet wet. So I assume most people here on this call are from British Columbia. There's a lot of amazing places we can see within an hour flight, within a 4-hour drive, whether you go to the island, you go to the wine country, you're going up north. You don't need to go to Greece for your first trip in order to get that confidence. You can start small and build your way up. Your first trip, you're probably going to overthink it. You're going to overpack, and that's totally fine. That first trip is just to kind of get an idea of what you need. And as you do a couple trips, you get really good at narrowing down your needs, how to vocalize them, what to bring, and eventually that prep time gets cut down and you're just very confident in doing it. And for me personally, starting small led to bigger things. So I included this slide. Again, I'm at GS, so I typically show this to people with newer injuries. These are all the places that I've camped by myself. So the green dots are in the middle of nowhere. The red dots are some sort of established campsite. And my first camping trip, I was so nervous. I was so worried. I didn't want to go with people because I was worried I'd be a burden, or if I had to cut the trip short, I didn't want to ruin anyone's time. So starting small for me was going for a weekend. And eventually that turned into 300,000 kilometers, 400 sites, over 40 national parks. And I know everyone's a little different. All our abilities different. But when you have a little bit of support from friends, partners, kids, family, you name it, you would be surprised where you can go and what you can do. I've been camping down on the Mexico border in Arizona with absolutely nobody around. I've seen a white van just bombing down the dirt road towards me. I think I'm either going to get robbed or it's border security, and they just continue past me, wave, they go up to the top of the hill. 4 people get out, lift comes down, power chair comes out, and they crash the night there. So that individual at the power chair, you know, they did it with friends, family, the right gear. I imagine they did a little bit of research too. So just arming yourself with as much knowledge as possible before you go to give yourself the confidence to go. Vocalizing your needs, not only to where you're going, but maybe family and friends, and doing a little research, talking to people like me, like Duncan, your fellow peers on this call, our information line. There's a lot of really good resources out there to make sure that you have the confidence needed to take that next step and take a big trip. And I appreciate your time. We can open it up for questions. For those that aren't aware, this is our information line. It's an amazing tool. So everything from calling about resources on the municipal level in your community, or you can say, I want to go to Newfoundland and view puffin birds at their accessible boats. We'll try and find the answer for you.
And I want to start us off with one little comment. We were talking about cushions on airlines. There are actual travel cushions that are available. And I know I traveled for years without a cushion. I would just take my cushion because it was too high to sit in the seat. I would put it above me in the luggage rack. I would still take it with me because I was afraid the airlines would lose it on my chair. But then I discovered I think it's a Rojo travel cushion. It's not as thick, like it's not made to be a chair cushion, but it's thin. It takes a little air. You can fold it up and you just put it on the seat. And when I started using that, it was so much better traveling. I didn't get spasms. I didn't get sweaty. I didn't get any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there
So
is
that's a really good thing to know. And then, okay, Linda. Linda's got her
Just a
hand
couple
up.
of comments, Ryan. Thank you so much. It was such a informative presentation. And even though I've traveled a lot, I learned lots today. One of the things that I'm going to throw out, and it's not really official, and you won't find it in the Mayo Clinic, but I have MS and I don't have a catheter. But if you take 3 or 4 ounces of red wine, it'll shut your bladder down for about 6 or 8 hours on the plane. So I buy a little bottle of red wine on the plane. I take a little bit, and a few hours later, take a little bit more. I agree with you. I was in New Orleans for Mardi Gras last year, and there is one wheelchair accessible cab, and it's not always available. And I guess I have the advantage that I don't weigh very much, because some people said go to the next street where there's lots of cabs. And this young man, Peter, said, "Oh, I can pick you up because I don't weigh 100 pounds." So he picked me up and put me in the cab. And then we booked him for the next 3 days to go to the parade. The third thing I want to say for people who do the assessment at YVR, that their toilets do not have a back on them. And they're really hard to use because when you lean backwards, you're leaning against the wall, at least for me.
Do you mean the toilets on the airlines?
No, in the airport.
Oh, okay.
So I would love in the airport to have some, at least the handicap washers, to have a back on them.
YVR, they have 2 toilets, I think, in international and domestic departures where I believe the toilets have a back. And they also have a ceiling lift and a changing station for the
Yeah, I
toilet.
don't need a ceiling lift. I just need a back.
Yeah,
on
but they did make 2 brand new washrooms that are like
Okay.
really accessible. And I believe the one of them has the back on the.
That would be a real advantage.
And I
Okay.
really appreciate your tip about the one. So that kind of speaks to what I was talking about like talking to peers and what works for them, right? Like
Yeah.
I can only provide so much information because I'm speaking on my experience and also what I've heard from others. So actually,
No, your presentation was great.
I appreciate that. But
Okay.
see, I learn something every day. I just learned that from you, right? So that's why I think it's the importance of talking to peers and asking these questions. You learn so much.
Uh, okay, Jackie's got her hand up. Go ahead, Jackie.
Hi there. Um, Thank you again, Ryan and Duncan, for getting this together. I am curious about like camper rentals. Do you have any information on that?
The info line will. And Ryan, do you remember the name of that trailer that you can rent? I think it's called the.
Yeah, so in the spring 2024 edition of the Spin, which you can get the PDF online, there is a trailer, it's a teardrop. So I don't know
That's
if you,
it.
yeah, so in terms of the exact company, newcamperrv.com has them. So we've issued that in our 2024 Spin. So that's nucamprv.com.
Okay,
there's
and
a
then there's
couple of them.
probably some other companies out there as well that the info line at SCI BC might be aware of.
There is, yeah. I think we have a few in our database, and I think there is a company. Uh, I'm not sure. It might be Drive Force. Don't quote me. Reach out to our info line that actually has a full-length RV that they rent out.
Yeah.
Okay, right on. Thank you.
Now, the other thing that I want to throw in here is that Ryan's stuff is great, and it's mostly based in North America, where I have to say that the airline industry has gone, they might not be perfect, don't get me wrong, but they have gone a lot further than many other places in terms of making their airlines accessible and accommodating people with disabilities. If you go someplace like inland China or Vietnam or any of these sort of third world countries, you're going to have to do a lot more due diligence. And sometimes you're just going to have to work around what the situation is. I know that I went to China, inland China, after the Beijing Paralympics with my wife. And when we were on the international flight, it was fine when we went to Beijing. But then we went to go inland, and you know how Ryan said you're always the first one loaded? Well, you're not necessarily the first one loaded there. They don't know what to do. It's really, really difficult. Now, it might have changed because when was the Beijing Paralympics? 2008, I think. Anyway, it ended up that I was not the first one loaded, and I had to direct them. And what we had to end up, they didn't have an aisle chair. So my wife and another guy that was there that could speak English took one wheel off my manual chair, wheeled me down to the first row, and I hopped into that row. And at that time, I could transfer quite well. It was not a big problem. But also, the other story that goes along with that is I kept trying to tell them that if I sat in the first row in first class, they wouldn't have to help me at all. And they kept saying, no, no, no. So we did this thing where we took the wheel off and I got into this seat in the back. And then they took my manual chair and strapped it into the front row of first class, empty. So, you never know what you're going to get. And
That's,
especially in third world countries, you have to be very careful in third world countries.
yeah, that's,
Sometimes things in third world countries are great in that a number of places that I went, the bathrooms actually just had a shower head sticking out of the wall. So it was like a man-made wheel-in shower that wasn't actually intended to be a wheel-in shower, but it was. But you have to physically go and see that kind of stuff.
that's such a very good point. I think I kind of just maybe glossed over towards the beginning. All the information and like the good parts of the accessible part with the airlines. It's North America and Western Europe are pretty consistent
Yeah,
with
yeah.
most of what I discussed. But I think I probably mentioned it 5 times, due diligence. So don't take my word for everything we said, because you have to get creative when you're going to all these places or these regions that Duncan's talking about.
And when you do go, people are really friendly in this world.
Mhm.
Not everybody's, a bad person around the world. I've only hit a couple of countries where I've run into some negativity. And I'm not going to mention them because that could have changed. And there's only two. In all the countries I've traveled to, there was only two where I had a lot of trouble. But most of the countries, someone would step up. I know my first long trip, I went to Thailand. And the first day I was there, I'm in a restaurant, and a Thai person tapped me on the shoulder, couldn't speak English, but essentially indicated to me not to leave my backpack on the back of my chair because it would get stolen. So these things happen. You know, you learn a lot when you travel. Linda, you have your hand up again?
Oh, just a quick comment. I'm going to congratulate you, Duncan, for being so inventive, because I've been on a airline in China where there's no aisle chair, and I have a picture of 4 guys trying to carry me on the plane into a seat.
Yeah, well, I
And I
congratulate you
did
on
take
getting
one
them to do
little,
that.
huh?
I congratulate you on getting them to do that. I couldn't get them to do anything.
Well, I had 4 or 5 of them. We had this crazy picture of me lying on my back, and then 4 or 5 of them trying to get me on the plane. There's
Yeah.
there's an advantage to not weighing too much.
Yeah.
They're a little more willing to help you sometimes.
And I think everybody needs to keep in mind, whenever you're requiring somebody to assist you with a transfer, you're in charge. So when you got people
Yeah.
helping you, not just at the airport, not getting on the plane, anywhere in life, if you have people assisting you in any way, you're in charge. You just don't let people like grab you, let's go. It's you kind of need to vocalize how you want somebody to help assist you.
Yeah, you need to be able to instruct people how to help.
Yeah.
I'm thinking the other question I had through your presentation, Ryan, was you said that batteries had to be properly packaged. I'm wondering if you have a sort of a description of what that means.
I can't give you a full descriptor because it's going to look different for every airline. I had a
Okay.
gentleman that left here for Colombia a couple of years ago out of GF Strong, and they wanted it to, he just said that they had to have it wrapped. So that was for whatever Air Colombia is.
Yeah.
Going back to calling the designated accessibility number for whatever airline. So, Delta Airline accessibility, Air Canada accessibility, calling them and saying, I have a spare battery. This is the wattage. How can I bring it on the plane? And how do I need to have it packed? And they're going to give you the black and white answer, because what might have been rule and regulation and standard practice a year ago might change now.
Yes,
So you
exactly.
need, like, I always do it like every couple of years if I'm flying, I'm always just making sure I'm up to date on the rules and regulations and anything like that. Like you always need to just keep, especially when you're traveling with batteries, power devices, medical devices, you name it, you just always need to be doing your due diligence before you hop on the plane.
Yeah. And I have to say things do change and people make mistakes. So, I mean, I for a long time was saying that Air Canada is probably the best airline in the world for people with disabilities. And then I was on a trip and I went to Denmark and they left my manual chair in Toronto. And they didn't get it back to me for 4 days, which I think was, a crime almost because they've got to have a flight there every day. Anyway, I was lucky because I was going to a wheelchair rugby tournament and one of the participants lent me his spare chair, so I got by. But they make mistakes. People do make mistakes. You got to be prepared for anything. I really like Ryan identifying to take medical supplies for at least 3 days. I would almost say 5 days because you never know when you're going to get your stuff. And I always did that just in case. Sean, you travel in your van, right?
Yeah, I do all my camping and everything out of my van.
And is it easy to book a site?
Uh, yeah, it doesn't seem to be much of a problem. A lot of places when we're going hunting and stuff, there's no campsites anyways. We're just in
Just in the van.
anywhere, right?
All
So
right.
wherever
Okay.
wherever I shut the motor off is where we are.
Duncan, Bruce
Yes.
Bruce Hawkshaw here, on
Yeah.
behalf of my wife Sandy.
Yeah.
Early on, Ryan said, and really important, is that if you just phone up the airlines, then you register with them. It's how that works to get this, so I could go with her.
Yeah, Ryan can answer that better than me.
Yeah, so again, why it's so important that things change from time to time. So when I wrote this a year ago, it might be a little different, but if you call the let's see, what's it called? So for Air Canada, it's Fitness for Air Travel form. And for WestJet, it's WestJet Medical Information Form. And it's a form that you would take to your GP, or if you have a physiatrist, either or, and they would fill it out for you.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. Just two seconds again. So it's the fitness for travel form? That's
Uh,
Air Canada?
So that's Air Canada, Fitness for Air Travel form.
Fitness for,
And for WestJet, it's WestJet Medical Information Form.
Now,
okay,
I want to reiterate what Ryan said too, in that I never got that done, because what that meant is that if you get that approved, you can't travel solo after that. You have to travel with an attendant while it's in effect. And
Oh.
I traveled solo a lot.
thanks very much. Thanks, Duncan.
I asked somebody from Air Canada about that, and I think, again, don't quote me, because one person tells you one thing at the airport and another tells you another. Especially I feel like YVR, or the airline and the airport, any place in the world, sometimes they have conflicting information, and you're not sure, like, well, who has the final say in this? So point being, I believe that you can appeal it, because I asked, like, well, people when they're in the rehab center, they need somebody to help them with them. But 2 years later, they're confident enough to travel solo, so they don't need that. So I think you can appeal or just get that taken off.
Okay. Okay, then the other thing is this just sorry, I've been listening, but I maybe didn't pay proper attention. Is this deal that they have for me to travel with Sandy, is that just Canada for Air Canada and just WestJet Canada?
So
it's-
Canada and USA
And
excluding
USA.
excluding Puerto Rico and
Whoa, okay,
Alaska.
Hawaii.
So it used to be just Canada, and I believe they added USA recently.
okay,
But again, maybe they stripped it and it's just Canada. So call and
sure.
do your research. Yeah.
Someone else has asked, I need a specialty mattress. I haven't been on a regular mattress for 14 years. How do I problem solve this when traveling? That's a tough one.
It is. So my first piece of a suggestion would be, let's just say you're flying to Toronto, and we'll use that as an example. I would reach out to any medical vendor or equipment vendor that sells medical equipment, wheelchairs, commodes, all that stuff. And first ask them if they know a route where you can rent one, because I imagine you don't want to buy one when you're landing in a destination. That's where I would first start. If you have the means, because I know some specialty mattresses, like they make a Rojo one, which is kind of like a air mattress that constantly recycling air, make sure it's full. I imagine you can kind of scrunch that up and put into a box, but that's not feasible for most people. So for me, it would be starting off with equipment vendors, and medical supply shops. So places that sell wheelchairs, commodes, beds, lifts. Just simply reaching out to them and being like, hey, this is my dilemma. I don't know if you rent or if you know another group that rents that you can turn me on to.
Yeah, that would be my advice as well. Is you're not going to be able to carry it with you, so you're going to need to get it there, and you're going to need to find it as a rental option.
Linda has her hand up.
Okay, go ahead.
Just to comment that I found that on Air Canada, I can fly solo or with an attendant, and I don't need to appeal it.
Oh,
Because when I
there
go
you
to
go.
Vernon to my son's, I don't need an attendant to go 55 minutes, but I need one when I go to Montreal. But WestJet, once you've had an attendant, you always have to have an attendant, and then you have to appeal, and it takes a whole long process to do that. So I
Okay.
tend to just go Air Canada.
okay.
Thanks for that information, Linda. Appreciate
And
it.
it's
Yeah.
interesting to hear that the US, because I've never been able to cash it in the US. Not that I'm going to the US these days. It'd be nice to have
No.
it to Mexico.
No. Jason, are you going to type out your question? I'm worried that we're not going to get to your question because your audio is just not working.
Well, if it's a question, I know Jason has my information. He can always reach out to me. And same with any of you, Duncan can always pass along my information. I'll put it in the chat, but if something comes up a week, a month from now, I mean, I feel like our information line is still the cream of the crop in terms of kind of reaching out with these questions, but you could always email questions or comments to me.
All right, we're at about 8 minutes. I want to say just one little thing in that I traveled a lot. I hit all the continents in the world except Antarctica at some point or another. And I did some things that I probably shouldn't have done. But you learn so much when you travel, and especially when you travel to places that well, outside of North America. Well, when you travel to some of the third world countries and that kind of stuff, you learn a lot of stuff. And when you come home, what I think is that we live in the best country in the world, and you start to appreciate where you come from and how much better it is here than it can be in a lot of other places. So I just want to throw that out there. I think traveling is something that everybody should do. Oh, here, Jason's got his question up. When flying, I found it most effective to explain my specific needs at the check-in desk, then again share the same info at the gate, and again to the flight crew. Yes, you know what? I would agree with that.
Yeah, I do. I usually have like I call it like the three check-in. So when I book my ticket, I'm making sure that it has my accessibility ticket needs listed. When like a few weeks before I fly, I'm calling the designated number, and when I arrive at the airport, I'm just saying, hey, like you have it on file, everything, right? So for me, I'm doing a 3-step process. Sounds like you're doing a 4-step process, which is even better.
I want to thank Ryan for doing this. He's done a great job. He's got a ton of information, and he's become a bit of an expert in the whole accessible travel area. So if you do need information, he's probably the guy to talk to. Oh, hang on. Hopefully it means your wheelchair is brought to the plane when you land instead of ending up in baggage. Oh yeah, that can happen too. There's all sorts of things that can happen when you fly. Sometimes they forget to bring your chair up. Sometimes, and you have to be diligent, and you almost have to be aggressive at times. But don't be obnoxious. How's that? Try and be nice about it, because you're leaving a reputation for everybody else that's in a chair. Okay. Thank you, Ryan. Great job.
Thanks, everybody.
I think you all know that we're done until September, and with the aging part of these ed sessions. And in September, we're going to do one on finances. That's already organized, and I've already sent some info to Heather Lamb, who's going to be doing the presentation. And then we're going to be looking at a couple other things in the fall. But for the summer, I'm taking some time off. Yeah. And we'll be back in September. So thank you all for participating and being here and asking questions. And I will let you all go.